Hey everybody, welcome back. Tonight we're going to talk about food plots and sandy soil. Now there's so many of us in this country that are, some would say blessed, some would say cursed, with food plotting and sandy soil. We picked up a lease a year back, and folks, it was probably the worst ground I've ever had to farm, but we made it work, okay? And what I like about this particular ground is that I have farmed in sandy soil before, but this whole property is one big sand pile. And what it does is it allows us to relate and present personal experience to the thousands, hundreds of thousands of you folks across this country that are food plotting in sandy soil conditions. You know, you're faced with some challenges right from the get-go. You know, you're not going to be able to use certain seeds. You know, you might have to plant at different times. You might have to have different spring plantings. You might have to have different fall plantings. You might have to use different equipment than what you see on TV on some of these big hunting shows and channels. But, you know, again, that's to me is kind of the intrigue about this property, is that when we finally get this snow that's covering the ground out of here, and we can actually get out and start filming on the food plots and walking you through our strategies. There's so many of you folks that can relate to this, what we're doing, so we're pretty excited about that. You know, there's not a lot of, in fact, I think when we came out with our sandy soil fall forage, I really didn't see anything out there that was designed for sandy ground. It was, these are our offerings, this is what you have to choose from, or you're going to have to make your own. So not only did we create the fall forage sandy blend out of necessity, not only for a lot of our customers in northern Michigan, central and northern Wisconsin, here in upper Michigan, but I needed it for myself. You know, this was a recipe we'd been working on, some sandy food plots, and now one of these properties we lease is completely sand, so it's in just about every food plot. So this is going to be a neat project for us when we finally get out on that ground and showing folks that aren't in this, you know, big Mississippi River Valley states that we see all these hunting shows on, you know, whether it's those, you know, states up here that I talked about or out east in those strip mine states. There's going to be a lot of information here that you all are going to be able to relate to. So when we start talking to folks about food plotting in sandy soil, obviously the very first thing I talk about is I'd like to see a soil test. What are we dealing with? You know, a lot of the comments I've seen not only from our own customers, I see it on social media. We put a lot of lime on these sandy soils, and I see a lot of folks making recommendations. The first thing they say when somebody's making a food plot in a sandy soil, make sure you lime it. Okay, well, what are we dealing with? But the one thing that I want to emphasize is lime alone is not going to fix this problem. In fact, it's not going to change that pH as fast as we think it's going to, because of there's just nothing in that soil. It's just blows right through that soil. So what we tell folks is, yes, we're going to have to lime it, and sometimes we might look into Brad Harper Growing Solutions or liquid lime on top of if we start adding pelletized lime or powdered lime. But I'm going to concentrate on fixing that organic matter, and we're going to attack it. The plan is to attack it spring and fall when we do our fall food plots. So our spring plantings are going to be organic matter builders, because odds are this number is very low. Now, we all have seen or heard of the buckwheat roll down method, and I think it's a really good method in certain parts of the country under certain conditions. And what I mean by that is that if you've got good organic matter in your soil, if you get timely rains, I think the buckwheat method is a great planting method. Not so much here, and I'll explain why. Like I said before in our organic matter building video we did a couple weeks ago, if you look at a buckwheat plant that's been in the ground 6 or 7 weeks, the root ball is about this big, okay? It's not going to move this number very much. And this is the biggest thing we need changed in a sandy soil food plot. We got to move this number. 6-week buckwheat is not going to do that. And then buckwheat, which is a phenomenal crush crop, because it's so full of moisture, you think about that buckwheat laying on that sandy soil for 3 or 4 days, it turns into straw. There's nothing left to it. Not much is going to cover those seeds. And, if we're in a drought condition and you have to roll your buckwheat down before it goes to seed, not a good situation. We're looking at organic matter builders. I really like, obviously, that soil builder blend was created for this situation. Even if it's just spring planted rye, I think is a much better option than buckwheat, because rye is going to be in the ground a lot longer. It's going to build a bigger root mass. Eventually, the deer are going to leave it alone. Whereas if you're trying to plant buckwheat in sandy soil, there's a lot of chances that you're in big woods, there's not a lot of food around, and the deer are going to annihilate that buckwheat food plot, so you've got nothing to roll down. That's why I like either spring planted rye or our soil builder blend. And if you want to add a little bit of crimson clover for a nitrogen component, that's fine. What's our fall plan going to be? It's going to be based heavily on cereal rye. I'd like to add oats once we start to get this number to change. Okay, I'd like to add some oats to it for diversity. I will add a little bit of buckwheat to it. We've got a sandy soil food plot blend that's got all three of these components, but we've got the rye, the oats, and the buckwheat proportionately to where we think it's going to do the best, A, feeding the deer, B, helping to move this number. Now, buckwheat, planted in August, it's going to get about that tall. We call it a candy crop, kind of like putting sprinkles or chocolate chips on your ice cream. You're going to probably eat those first, and they're not really doing much. They're going to be gone rather quickly. So I really don't look at the buckwheat as an OM builder, if we're planting it in the fall for the deer. But we're going to do heavy cereal rye. But 9 times out of 10, I'm planting it all at once. I'm not coming back with the rye overseed. I'll talk about that in a little while. I like to get this all in the ground at once, and the deer are going to do, odds are the deer are going to do a very good job of keeping that rye, not letting it get away and getting mature. It's going to do kind of like when you mow your lawn. It's going to grow back, but I like getting the rye and the oats all planted at once. Last year, I think we planted our food plot 10th of August. That seems to be the familiar number. So if you think you want to do a clover in sandy soil, I really like red. That's what we did on some of our food plot on that lease. We did red clover, and it actually did quite well from the amount of time that it was in the ground. I'm really not looking at whites. I'm not looking at our clover blend. White clover needs a lot of moisture. White clover needs different nutrient requirements. White clovers, most of them, don't take sandy soil quite well. Some clovers are going to go dormant. A lot of those white clovers are just flat going to die if you get into a drought situation. I just don't recommend that. We strongly recommend, if you're going to do clover, for clover planting, we're going to do red clover. You probably can add some chicory to that as well. Chicory's got a deep taproot. We did a video a couple months ago on a small food plot where all the white clover went dormant in the drought. Chicory was still doing really well. The one thing that we tell folks is please don't plant brassica. I just don't think you're going to get the return that you're hoping for in a sandy soil condition. You think about the moisture requirements for brassica and those big leaves. You think about the nutrient requirement for brassica. You think about the environment a sandy soil food plot presents. Brassica I just don't think you're going to get the amount of tonnage that you need and expect a brassica to do. I've seen brassica planted. I've seen pictures, 4 inches tall, yellow, purple, maybe the size of a ping pong ball, a turnip, and they just stop growing at the end of August. It's just not an environment for most brassicas. Now, we are working with a company overseas that's talking to us about a drought-resistant brassica. I'm very interested in it, but, drought-resistant brassica that you grow in good soil and shut the water off versus this brassica that you grow in sandy soil and shut the water off. I'm very interested to see how that correlation is. But for now, I'm just not going to recommend brassica in sandy soil. Brassica are a really good food plot, but if you can't get it to grow, you're just wasting space, time, and money. Now, tillage, a lot of people would be screaming right now, you don't want to do tillage, you want to do a no-till, you want to do no-till, no-till. I get that, I understand that, and if I had a no-till drill, I would probably be doing that in sandy soil. But folks, there's thousands of people watching this video right now, and how many of them own a no-till drill? Probably not many. You know, there's a lot of people that just have a quad, a roller, you know, maybe a disc or a drag, a harrow drag, and that no-till drill doesn't relate to them. So if I had a no-till drill, we would be doing some sort of crimping, spraying, and drilling, but we don't have one. So tillage, why do I like a little bit of tillage on a sandy soil food plot? It's to get the seeds in the ground, okay? I have done a lot of no-till, throw and grow, and on this crappy ground that's around here, and I think I've had it work twice. I've had it fail more than I've had it worked. And it's not the seed's fault, it's the conditions, okay? When you think about rain, and we watched this on that lease ground, we went out and actually overseeded rye in the rain. Rye was germinating within 2 days. We didn't get rain for 2 weeks. All that rye seed died. You know, it threw a root, and in that sandy ground, the moisture just doesn't stay in that top layer very long, and it died. You know, I was in the rain, I'm dropping rye seed, but it all died. And it's just because that ground doesn't sustain that moisture in that very top layer. Now, had I went in there with like a drill, maybe a grain drill that could penetrate, probably would have done quite well. But, you know, the rye overseed on sandy soil, boy, it's, excuse me, I think it's kind of a hit or miss proposition. You need a lot of rain. You need multiple rains to keep that rye growing, to get that root deep enough into the ground, where if the water shuts off, it's not going to affect it. So we kind of went against conventional wisdom, and we put all our cereal grains in. We put everything in at once. We put it all in early August. And again, I want to say August 10th, 15th, sometime in there. We put this in, you know, a lot of people say, well, you're planting your rye way too early. You want to do that rye overseed. And I thought, no, I'm not. I'm dealing with sandy ground. And the second this food plot, the deer find this food plot, you know, they're going to bring a friend and they're going to bring another friend, and I'm going to have a lot of mouths to feed. So I'm not worried about that rye getting overly mature. You know, if that rye got maybe 10 inches tall, 8 inches tall, that's great. I'm banking food because they ate it all. You know, by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, it looked like a golf course. So that rye maturing theory, as far as that food plot in that situation, it didn't happen. You know, we plant. So when I'm dealing with sandy soil, I'm really not looking at a rye overseed unless we're in a weather pattern that's producing rain, you know, every 3 or 4 days. But we put all our seed in the ground at once, and it worked perfect. You know, again, I'd really like to be out at that food plot right now showing everybody. But again, we got to get rid of the snow. So we do have a video from sandy soil planting, I think back in early August. We've got a video when we were actually out there. So if you kind of dig back 15, 20 videos, you'll actually see us out on that food plot planting and what we're dealing with. But we got the seeds buried. We got a rain the next day, and it was up within 6 days. So it'll work. It needs rain, but in my opinion, in my experience, those seeds need to be buried. So I hope that helps, folks. You know, there's so many of us, like I said, that are dealing with sandy soil food plots, and a lot of the information out there just doesn't seem to relate to sandy soil food plots. So if you've got questions, by all means, reach out to us. If you want to ask about our sandy soil products, something that's going to work in your food plot, we've got food plot seed that'll work in just about every situation in this country. So feel free to reach out if you want to have a conversation in the discussion below. If you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, if you've got experiences, I'd love to hear from it. Maybe I'll learn something. So thanks for watching, folks. Thanks for helping the channel grow. It's just amazing to see this channel grow. Can't thank you all enough. We'll see you in a few days.